Hello everyone. Let's label together the structures on the radius and the ulna. The radius and the ulna are the two bones in the forearm. The ulna, this is the ulna, is the medial bone, and the radius is the lateral bone when the body is in the anatomical position. So right here we can see the body is in the anatomical position, which is upright, facing forward. The arms are hanging at the sides and the palms are facing forward. Starting with the structures on the ulna, which is the medial bone. This right here is the interosseous membrane, which is a membrane that connects both bones together. On the ulna, we have the olecranon. So this structure right here is the olecranon. This notch, we can see part of it right here. This is the trochlear notch. The trochlear notch on the ulna, it articulates with the trochlea on the humerus. Check out my video on the humerus to understand the structures and where the trochlea is. This is the coronoid process. On the ulna also, we have the radial notch of the ulna. So it is a notch that receives the radius, which is the bone next to the ulna. Right here, distally, we have the head of the ulna. So the head of the ulna is toward the distal aspect, closer to the wrist joint, whereas the olecranon is toward the proximal aspect, closer to the elbow joint. And this right here is the ulnar styloid process. So this is the styloid process of the ulna. Moving to the structures on the radius, we will label them in blue. This is the head of the radius. So notice that the head of the radius is toward the elbow joint, whereas the head of the ulna is toward the wrist joint. This is the neck right here of the radius. This is the radial tuberosity. On the radius, we have the ulnar notch of the radius. So don't confuse the radial notch of the ulna, which is a notch on the ulna for the radius. Whereas the ulnar notch of the radius, it is a notch on the radius for the ulna. And this right here is the radial styloid process. So we have an ulnar styloid process and a radial styloid process. This is the proximal radio-ulnar joint because it is toward the elbow, the proximal aspect, whereas this is the distal radio-ulnar joint. Moving to the posterior aspect of the radius and the ulna, this is the ulna and this is the radius. This is the interosseous membrane. This is the olecranon. You can see part of the olecranon. On the humerus, which is the bone in your arm, you have the olecranon fossa, which is the fossa on the posterior aspect of the humerus. The olecranon fossa receives the olecranon of the ulna. This is the head of the ulna. This is the styloid process of the ulna, also called the ulnar styloid process. This is the ulnar notch of the radius. So this is part of the radius. It's a notch on the radius for the ulna. That's why it is called the ulnar notch of the radius. This is the head of the radius, and this is the neck of the radius. And this is the radial styloid process. So we have a styloid process on the ulna and one styloid process on the radius. I hope you found the video helpful. Check out my next video on the skeleton of the hand.